very good evening and a warm welcome to Saturday's edition of Diplomatic Faces. Now, the economic conditions in Sri Lanka is definitely a topic that we all need to look into. And in connection to that, the relations, rather the bilateral relations that Sri Lanka has with the rest of the countries is what we are going to discuss today. So, joining with us today is the Maldivian Ambassador to Sri Lanka, His Excellency, Mr. Mohammad Hussein Sharif. A very good evening to Your Excellency.
Thank you. Great pleasure.
Your Excellency, now for a person, for an individual to join a particular sector, there are various driving factors. And especially when it comes to the foreign service sector, it has many challenges and it's not necessarily a simple and an easy task. So if I may to ask you as to what made you to sort of join the foreign service sector?
Right. Firstly, I'm not a career diplomat, so it was not a chosen profession. I would say I ended up in diplomacy or foreign service as a sum total of attributes that I picked up and I had over many years in government. I filled a number of portfolios back at home, including Minister of Youth, Sports and Human Resources, and then Minister at the President's Office. And part of my duties in my previous portfolios involved diplomacy, interacting with bilateral and multilateral partners, traveling a lot. So that was one reason why I think I've ended up where I am now. In addition to that, I was also spokesman of the government for many years in a previous administration. So again, Sri Lanka in particular is an important place in many ways for us. Of course, you're our nearest neighbor and dearest neighbor. In addition to that, of course, Sri Lanka is home to a number of our diplomatic corps. So many of the embassies here in Sri Lanka, ambassadors here in Sri Lanka, my counterparts here, are actually accredited to Sri Lanka and the Maldives, so I interact with them on a daily basis as well. So it wasn't a chosen profession, but it's one that I'm enjoying, and it's a learning process. Before I came to Sri Lanka, I was our ambassador in Japan. So this is my second posting as ambassador.
So with that, like you correctly mentioned, extensive traveling is something that ambassadors do on a daily basis, and especially in the foreign service sector, it's not easy because there are so many challenges that an ambassador would face. So what are the challenges, Your Excellency, that you came across in the foreign service sector?
Right, particularly in Sri Lanka, of course, we have 15 diplomatic missions abroad. The Maldives has embassies in 15 different countries. This is by far the largest and most important for us. Firstly, because Sri Lanka is home to the single largest diaspora of Maldivians. We think it's about 14,000 at the moment. So there are 14,000 of my countrymen and women who live and go about their daily work here in Sri Lanka. In addition to that, of course, Sri Lanka and the Maldives being closest neighbors, we've had a special relationship dating back many centuries, really. So the bilateral ties between Sri Lanka and Maldives is important. As I mentioned, the diplomatic community here are also accredited in many cases to the Maldives, so I have to deal with them as well. And then, of course, the press. It's the same formula with newswires, for example. Many of them have correspondents who are accredited to both Sri Lanka and the Maldives. So a lot of the messaging, a lot of the important information is relayed out of Sri Lanka for us. So it's a busy job, but it's an enjoyable one at the same time.
How would you describe your job as an ambassador, and if you may briefly describe about your day-to-day affairs being an ambassador? How does it work?
Well, quite honestly, the largest part of my day would go towards addressing the needs of the diaspora here, because there are so many Maldivians. In addition to the embassy, which is in Bambalapitiya, we have a second place in Pamankata, which is also owned by the Maldivian government, where we've, with the kind support and assistance of the Sri Lankan government, we've developed a small colony, the Maldives Cultural and Education Center, where we provide a number of services to Maldivians living here in Sri Lanka. So we oversee both at the same time. Personally, for me, Sri Lanka, working here in Sri Lanka is very easy, because Sri Lanka is, I tell people, it's not just second home, it's home for me, because I studied here many years ago. I went to school here for 7 years. I did my O-levels, A-levels. I still have more friends here than back home in the Maldives. So it's a very familiar setting for me to work in, a very homely environment for me. So many people I know, so many contacts. So going about my daily work is so much easier because I know the terrain, I know the people, I know the roads, I know the culture, the weather, and the lovely food as well. So Sri Lanka, being ambassador to Sri Lanka is challenging in so much as you have to address a number of different issues. But at the same time, we also get a lot of support from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Sri Lanka, who facilitate our work here. And they do a wonderful job supporting not just me, all the diplomatic corps here. So it's very easy for us, protocol-wise, to do our work on a daily basis. So I would spend my mornings and early noon time here at the embassy. Officially, we get about 300 to 400 on certain days consular requests. So there is, if you like, a counter service where Maldivians come here to renew their passports, visas, marriage certificates, attestations, name it. They come here for these kind of daily counter services as well. And of course, I have to meet my counterparts and, of course, officials of the Sri Lankan government. That happens until about 2-3 o'clock, and then, of course, I go to the cultural center in the evening, where I spend a lot of time there until about 6-7 o'clock on certain days, where, of course, we have almost a fully fledged school. Maldivians here can send their children to the cultural center to learn our vernacular, our language. So a lot of parents who are here for their children's schooling would send their children to one or another international school during the day, but in the evenings, after their school's done, they would send them to this school to teach them the Vehi. We have to oversee, in effect, in the afternoons I become a headmaster. And of course there are a lot of young people who are there for their sports. There's futsal, there are a couple of futsal grounds there, there's a gymnasium, there's a youth center. So it is a hub for thousands of Maldivians really on a daily basis. So I'm there usually in the afternoon. So it's a full job, but it's an enjoyable one.
And Sri Lanka was among the first countries which Maldives established diplomatic relations, of course. And the Maldives established the formal ties with Sri Lanka on the very first day that Maldives gained independence, that is on 26th July 1965. So how is the foreign relations between Sri Lanka and Maldives?
Oh, it's special. It's not just good, it's special. With Sri Lanka, we have, we are never bogged down by protocol. So we have direct lines where we can communicate with your government and vice versa. Of course, you're right. We established relations with Sri Lanka on day one, and there's a reason why that's the case. Our actual independence was signed here in Colombo. The Governor General of the British Empire, of course, was here because we were a protectorate, we were, of course, a colony. But we were being governed, as far as foreign affairs was concerned, until we gained independence. It was being done out of Colombo. I actually sit at the desk which was used by the Governor General at that point. It's a gift of the British government to us. So the Independence Declaration itself was signed here. And to commemorate that, 2 years ago, of course, 3 years ago rather, 2 years and a bit ago, we celebrated our 50th anniversary of independence, and the guest of honor was your president. And rightly so, because, of course, no country is more special to us than Sri Lanka, because, the ties between the two countries go back in history, way beyond, documents or contemporary historical literature. There are references to both countries in, Roman documentation. For example, you Sri Lankans are known as Serendim, which is Seren Divi in certain languages. We are Divi. So wherever there's a reference of Sri Lanka, there would always be a reference of Maldives. So they speak of islands called Seren Divi and Divi. So even in Eastern and Western literature, they would always punch the two countries together because we were always so close. And of course, we've had trade relations and ties, dating back many centuries as well. Essential commodities would come out of Sri Lanka, it would go via Sri Lanka, so it would be a hub. A number of very prominent Maldivians lived here. You know, they lived here in Colombo, in Galle, elsewhere. You still have mosques, for example, which were built by Maldivians here in Sri Lanka. And of course, archaeology, proves that 800 years ago when we converted to Islam, before that we were Buddhist. And so there's a lot of dagyabas and a lot of stupas that we find, among our most treasured archaeological artifacts and finds. And those all point to olden day relations between the two countries as well. And that has continued. After independence, of course, the two countries have always seen eye to eye with each other. And when Sri Lanka, for example, was going through the civil conflict, we always stood up and stood shoulder to shoulder with Sri Lanka. And because peace in Sri Lanka, for example, was also important for us. So it was something that was a priority for us as well. So we've developed a special bond based on trust, on camaraderie, on brotherhood, and very much people to people relations. Like I told you, almost half of Maldivian diaspora living abroad live here in Colombo, in Sri Lanka, and I'm now told that we are the third largest tourism source for Sri Lanka. So the third largest number of people coming into Sri Lanka are Maldivians. So we are also a tourism source for you. We are also the largest medical tourism source for Sri Lanka, a large source for educational institutions. So we also gainfully contribute to your economy. At the same time, Sri Lanka so graciously hosts so many of our people here, and we are mindful of that relationship. So it's multifaceted. It's a beautiful relationship which is built on trust. So it's not just the real kind of hard-nosed diplomacy that we speak about. We're talking about people-to-people ties. I pick up the phone and talk to many officials here who are friends, firstly, and then officials thereafter. So it's special. It's, I think, unprecedented. You wouldn't find that sort of relationship anywhere else.
And definitely, being Sri Lankans, we are really contented to hear that we have such a strong relationship with Maldives, of course. And Your Excellency, now talking about tourism, tourism is definitely the talked about topic nowadays. And Sri Lanka is definitely having various strategies to improve tourism by 2020. And in terms of that, they're developing infrastructure and many more facilities to the foreigners as well. And definitely in Maldives, tourism is one of the main income sources. So how would you promote tourism in Sri Lanka in connection to Maldives?
Went viral globally, really. Firstly, of course, the one island, one resort concept. So in the Maldives, if you are on a resort, you're on a separate island, which is very private to you. It's just you and the staff of the island, nobody else. So you have that peace, you have that privacy, and so on. We've gone on then, of course, to make popular the water bungalows, so on stilts, which you have seen. And more recently, the world's first, second, and third underwater restaurants, the world's first underwater spa, and the list keeps going on. So some of the most luxurious tourism products globally in hospitality is in the Maldives. It's not one of the largest industries, it's by far the largest industry in the Maldives. The largest income source, largest foreign currency source, and the largest source for employment as well for Maldivians. So tourism, it's far and above any other sector as far as livelihood for the Maldivians is concerned. And we've always had this experience where our tourism can have a positive impact on Sri Lanka and vice versa. Sri Lankan tourism is doing well, and it will continue to grow, I guarantee you. A number of Sri Lankan, and again, relations between the two countries as far as investment in tourism is a two-way relationship. A number of Sri Lankan brands have been in the Maldives for many decades, really. We've got the John Keel's has been holding resorts for many years. Aitken Spence have their resorts in Maldives. The Golf Face Group, the Mount Lavinia Group, and more coming as well, and investments from other sources. At the same time, there are Maldivian entrepreneurs who are actually putting up their resorts here, in the east and elsewhere. So you're going to have a lot of inward investment as well, and that's a good sign. A number of our resort brands are coming here simply because they see that the not just peace, but the scope for tourism is tremendous, and we're of course riding the bandwagon as well. So tourism numbers between the two countries are now almost on parity. During the time of the war, of course, Sri Lanka had a stump in tourism, That's all changed now, and you know, the sky's the limit. You know, the infrastructure is improving, and we always see it as a complementary industry. For example, from Europe, a lot of people will travel, you know, long distances, probably a day, you know, multiple flights to come here, to our part of the world. So we always encourage people to experience what Sri Lanka has to offer, because there's so much diversity in Sri Lanka. In the Maldives, you have sun, sea, and sand, but Sri Lanka has history. Sri Lanka has mountains. You know, Sri Lanka has a variety of things that would be appealing to tourists. So even our travel agents would always encourage people to do a mix and match. Spend a few days in Maldives, but don't miss out on Sri Lanka. Because of course it's just a stone's throw away. Why would you want to miss out on Sri Lanka if you're coming this far? And vice versa. So that's again an easy connection, simply because daily there are up to 8 flights between the two countries. So traveling is an hour and a half. I mean, for us, you know, going from Colombo to Male is like going from your living room to your kitchen. That's how easy it is. You know, we travel almost every weekend. Go back home, family and loved ones, back again and work on, you know, Monday morning. So it's that easy. It's that easy. It's that close.
Definitely, that's really nice to hear in terms of the tourism aspect. Now that Sri Lanka is also improving many strategies to increase tourism. And Your Excellency, what advice would you give to the general public when it comes to the health and the education sector that Sri Lanka could gain and improve in the local context?
We actually have a very elaborate and very unusual welfare system in the Maldives, insurance system in the Maldives. So any Maldivian who's taken ill can get their Medicare for free from the government. So whatever your ailment, you know, whether it's outpatient, inpatient, you can, back at home, they can just produce their national identity card, and all the medication, everything is covered by the state. And that scheme actually has an umbilical cord with Sri Lanka, because any medical, any procedure, any, you know, surgery, any procedure that cannot be done back at home, they're eligible then to come abroad. So on a given day, you would have 500 to 2,000 Maldivians patients in the empaneled hospitals here. Some of your top hospitals are empaneled by our state welfare system. Asiri Hospital, Lanka Hospital, you know, Durden's Hospital, Nine Wells Hospital. These are all Navaloka Hospital. These are all empaneled hospitals. So they would be treating our Maldivians. They would be sending an email with the full requests and you know, the summaries, and the government will pay. Almost on a monthly basis, we're paying in excess of $1 million to your hospitals as payments for treating our patients, which are sent by our welfare system. So we are also proud to be the #1 source of medical tourism for Sri Lanka. Similarly, for schools, Maldivians, as I told you, the number here is about 14,000. Even the student number, we think, is in excess of 5,000 to 6,000. And they're all scattered across the international schools here, by and large. And many schools tell us that almost half, or if not more, of their student population are Maldivians. So again, we are very proud and very happy to be contributing to the education sector here as well. A simple message would be, you know, if the quality is good and if the services are as they are, then, you know, more and more people will come here and avail of the wonderful opportunities. So you're doing something right, and that's why we're coming here, because we don't. More Maldivians used to go at one point to India. The number is reducing. They're all opting for Sri Lanka. It's easier, it's more convenient, and the service is excellent. And the facilities are great as well, even with the schools. So I've had a lot of interactions since I came with the schools here, the management of the international schools here. And you know, what they offer is very appealing to our parents. So they come here, they settle in Sri Lanka, send their children to school. Or others who are here for longer term ailments. For example, if they have an elderly parent who needs, you know, Medicare, then you know, more often than not, they come here, they settle down, and they get the treatment in your hospital. So again, if the quality is good, if it's affordable, and if the service is as it is, of global standards, then you would find that our people will continue to opt for Sri Lanka as their place of choice.
And Your Excellency, now Maldives is currently Sri Lanka's third largest trade partner in the South Asian region, and after India and Pakistan, of course. So what measures do you propose to further strengthen the economic ties between the two countries?
Firstly, it's a little bit more than trade, actually. Relations, economic ties between the two countries are actually driven at the highest level. My president is the premier economist in the country, so he attaches the highest priority to investment and trade relations between the two countries. As a result, as I told you, I had a recent interaction with our tourism minister, who was here recently, actually for a medical care for a loved one. And His Excellency confirmed to me that sitting on his desk right now are investments from Sri Lanka to the Maldives in tourism in excess of $300 million, right here, right now. That's the scope. Similarly, a lot of Maldivian companies and Maldivian entrepreneurs are investing here in a lot of different sectors. Traditionally, it was fishery. Now, you Sri Lankans made popular Maldive fish, which is actually tuna, which is skipjack tuna, but Sri Lankans were so fond of it, going back to our forefathers, that they actually call it Maldive fish and associate the fish with the Maldives, which is a great honor for us. But it used to be fish processing and re-exporting that was the bulk of the trade volume between the two countries. But now new products and new services are getting into this as well, and that's what's inflating the export and import volumes between the two countries. But more than that, a lot of your companies, not just in tourism, there are a number of construction companies out of Sri Lanka who are investing in the Maldives, and other areas as well. They're now investing in the Maldives, and vice versa, we're investing here. So trade and economic ties between the two countries will continue to flourish because we have two governments now which are mindful of this and which are accommodative of this. So Sri Lankans who want to invest in the Maldives have a one-stop shop arrangement where they can do all their paperwork, they can repatriate all their profits in full in US dollars back to their country. The same with the BOI here has been very helpful and very supportive towards our entrepreneurs who wish to invest here. So trade, as you rightly pointed out, we might be the third in number, but the significance, I think, is probably higher than India or Pakistan, in so much as some of your most globally prominent brands, like the Chayas and the Adarans, they're all in the Maldives. So we have that affinity as well. And let us not forget the Sri Lankans working in the Maldives as well. Not only are there 14 to 15,000 Maldivians here, there is an equal number of Sri Lankans working in our resorts in very high positions as well. They're in various sectors, particularly in tourism, where many are in managerial positions as well. We've got your bank in the Maldives. We've got actually two. We've got both Commercial Bank and Bank of Ceylon now in the Maldives. So it's a relationship that keeps growing every day.
That's definitely, we are glad, in fact, to hear that the relationships doesn't reduce, but rather keeps improving day by day. And Your Excellency, there is a talk that the Maldives may eventually be submerged in water, and that the country has been considering relocating. So could you briefly explain that?
No, we never considered relocation. There was, well, at least the pragmatic and professional governments that have been in Maldives didn't. That's not all governments. That's barring one. The Maldives does have a major problem as far as global warming and sea level rise. In fact, we were the ones who put the issue of sea level rise on the global map. Maldives, it's 1,198 very tiny islands. Firstly, there is a wrong perception out there, including us and Maldivians. We actually think of the Maldives to be very, very small. That's right, because individual islands are very small. But what if we connect all the 1,198 islands as a jigsaw puzzle? It's actually bigger than Sri Lanka. The landmass of the Maldives is slightly larger than Sri Lanka, and of course we occupy a very large space. The Indian Ocean economic zone is massive. It's the largest of any country to occupy that much of the Indian Ocean. So sea level rise becomes an issue because all our islands are coral-based archipelagos. They're all low-lying. About 80% of the landmass of the country, the entire country, that doesn't mean certain islands, that means 80% of every island is no higher than 3.5 feet above sea level. So therefore, if sea level rises, we have issues. We already have these issues. So inclemental weather, we have tidal issues, wave, tidal surges. There's also erosion that becomes a problem. But we face that with engineering, and we have contingencies to work on that. For example, 3.5 feet, the statistics I just shared are for natural islands. A number of islands, of course, are being made as well all the time. So there are artificial islands as well. You can landfill a reef and you have an island. For example, the new city, which is bordering Male, Hulu Male, which is a model city, is higher. We built it a few feet higher as a contingency against future climate change and sea level rise. It's a global issue. We are the chair of AOSIS, that is the Global Small Islands Organization. So we also lead the lobbying in the UN and at the UNFCCC when it comes to climate change and sea level rise. We are a member of the Paris Agreement, and we do our part, but we also do a lot of lobbying globally to make sure there is concrete action against climate change and sea level rise. It's a problem, but not one that, of course, will result in us leaving our homeland. We don't plan to do that. There's engineering, and there are ways where we can of course exist, but it's expensive. Where we can make our islands higher, and hopefully future generations will continue to inhabit our islands as well.
So definitely there are ways to improve without going beyond the issue.
Right.
Yes,
that's right.
So Excellency, apart from the questions we just discussed, is there anything that you would like to highlight from your perspective?
Firstly, to say thank you to the Sri Lankan government and people, because it's the arrangement we have here for my diaspora here is special, and there is no country, and this I'm telling you from experience, where even from a neighboring friend, the type of arrangements and the type of special considerations that my diaspora have here, thanks to the Sri Lankan government, is unprecedented. They go about their daily work and their daily lives as if they were back at home. Everything is so convenient for them, whether it's their resident visas, whether it's putting their children to school, whether it's Medicare. As I said, we were able to develop on our property in Pamankata as a cultural and educational center, thanks to the permission of the Sri Lankan government. So firstly, a big thank you to the Sri Lankan government for the special arrangements they make for us. Similarly, the Sri Lankan people as well. There are so many Maldivians here, and we coexist happily with you as if we are brothers, and we feel very much at home. But I tell my people here, please be mindful that we are the visitors and you are the hosts. So we should always be gracious, respect Sri Lankan laws, respect Sri Lankan culture, traditions. It's a lovely country, multi-ethnic, multi-religious. So, only then will we have a reciprocation of the type of love that we have for Sri Lanka. So that's really the message. We are here as friends. We are here to also support you. Hopefully, in our stay here, we are also contributing to your economy and your well-being, and of course advancing a relationship that's special and goes back to our forefathers. So it's two countries that I think enjoy a very unique friendship, and one that we as officials are privileged to be part of as well. So as ambassador here, I think my duties are different to all my colleagues here, because my diaspora here, they're so welcome here. They feel very much at home. But I always have to remind them that you must respect Sri Lankan laws. You must be mindful of tradition, culture, and so on. But it's a happy relationship, and it's easy for the Sri Lankan government also to give us these facilities because we're very thankful for what we get as well.
So, Excellency, as a final question, there are so many people out there who are definitely willing to join the foreign service sector. And like we discussed even before, there are various challenges, there are many tasks that they need to look into. So what advice would you give for a person, if they're interested to join this particular field?
If you have good communication skills and enjoy meeting people, talking to people, listening to people, I think that's paramount. If you have a love for interpersonal relations, and if you're confident talking to people, if you're confident listening to people, and if that's your cup of tea, then the rest, of course, the etiquette of diplomacy, the international laws, the norms, the kind of bilateral or multilateral relations issues that we have to face, protocols, those you can all learn as you go along. As I said, I'm not a career diplomat. I was not trained as a diplomat. Of course, I did one of my degrees in politics and economics, one in diplomacy and one in environment and climate change. Diplomacy was something I learned in university, but it's not something that I actually practiced in, up until recently in my career. But it's something that kind of grew on me, and it was very easy to pick up, because if you have the attributes of meeting people and can communicate, then the rest is easy. The rest you can pick up and learn and be made aware of as you go along. There are, of course, things that you have to be mindful of being a diplomat, for example, because you travel a lot. And so you live out of a briefcase at times. So sometimes, you need very patient partners and, families to do what we do, because we move around a lot. And, for them, it's very taxing. It's very difficult. For example, if you're a diplomat, you put your children in school in one country, you pull them out, you put them in a different country the next day. It's great being exposed to different cultures, but the continuity is something that they would probably miss as well. So you need a very patient family also to be able to do this work. But it's an enjoyable one. You get to see the world, you get to meet people of different cultures, traditions, languages. It's one I would recommend to young people. And Sri Lanka has always had a very good foreign service. We come across Sri Lankan diplomats everywhere. As I said, I was in Japan before as well. And then even previously, having been a minister, having been in government, having attended probably more conferences than anyone else in the Maldives, you always meet Sri Lankan diplomats, and they're wonderful. They are such ambassadors to your country, and they are loved and admired and respected by colleagues elsewhere. That is because, of course, the foreign service here has the professional etiquette and arrangement and the training. So a lot of new young faces are joining your diplomatic corps and going everywhere and representing your country and putting your country where it is. So enjoyable job where you will have the satisfaction of knowing that you served your people, but at the same time, personally too, you develop as a human being by interacting with so many different people.
So there are definitely so many challenges that they have to look into, and many tasks, like you correctly mentioned about the family and many more things, especially in terms of extensive.
It's hard work. I agree, but it's enjoyable. It's a career where if say sitting behind a desk and going through the motions every day isn't your thing, diplomacy definitely is. Diplomacy itself has evolved. It's no longer just about protocols. Briefcase diplomacy they call it today, because we go meet a lot of people. In fact, I met an ambassador yesterday, and I have this office, he has his office, but we chose to have coffee outside. We could very well have met in our offices, but we preferred the ambience of having meeting halfway. So it's about personal relations. You meet a lot of people. You learn a lot as well by being in other countries. I, for one, of course, learned a lot. But here in Sri Lanka, for me, it's different, because as I told you, this is home for me. So I'm probably the only diplomat who feels very much at home, in the host country. So for me, it's returning home rather than, going to a foreign country and having to acclimatize. For me, plane touches down in Bandaranaike, I'm at home. I feel at home, I'm happy, I'm relaxed,
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for
Pleasure's all
joining
mine. Thank you
with
very
us
much.
on Diplomatic Face and sharing our valuable thoughts with us. And it was definitely indeed a great pleasure to have you on Diplomatic Faces. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a wrap of Saturday's edition of Diplomatic Faces. Have a pleasant evening.